Hey BookTube, it's Greg from Coffee/Books. I've been wanting to make this video for a while now. It is all about the author SANDRA CISNEROS. Now, as some of you may know, I am a part-time graduate student in English, and last spring semester, which would have been spring 2021, I had taken a major author seminar, which was solely focused on SANDRA CISNEROS. Some of you may have heard of her from some of her works, but probably most notably The House on Mango Street, which I believe I read in middle school or ninth grade. And when I told my professor this, she was kind of like shocked and surprised that I would have read such a book at such a young age, but I remember it was required reading in my, Pennsylvania public school. And rereading it as an adult was definitely interesting because some of the themes you don't pick up on, especially when you're just like a teenager just trying to get your work done for school. So yeah, we read a lot of her works. I'm gonna go through kind of like one by one and just get a little chat about it. But the reason why I've been finally made this video is that she released a new book a few months ago, so I'm gonna talk about that soon. Sure. Okay. So the first thing we read in this course, which again was a graduate level seminar, it also had undergraduates in it, and our professor is kind of, she specializes in Latinx literature, Chicana literature. She's accessed archives of like famous people, and she follows Cisneros very closely. She's like a scholar on Cisneros, so it was interesting to have that, discussion only on one author for an entire semester. But this is Woman Hollering Creek and Other Stories. These are mostly short stories. Some of them are definitely intimate about struggles that maybe Mexican Americans and immigrants face in their daily lives. Some of it is from a previous time period that take place in Mexico. I definitely enjoyed it. House on Mango Street, it's like a classic, right? Rereading this was interesting as an adult, and then discussing some of the themes and learning with my classmates and learning with my professors, like, oh, that's what that was really about. Again, this is a short read, so if you have it around and you remember reading it in high school, maybe when you learn a little bit more about Cisneros, going back and rereading some of the stories would definitely be worthwhile. This is her autobiographical stories, A House of My Own, Stories from My Life. It contains a lot of different stories, from everything from when she first kind of embarked on being a writer in her first, college classes, all the way to, later in her life. Again, I feel like after taking this class, I know more about SANDRA CISNEROS than any other author, maybe a little bit more than I care to know about her. But again, she's really intriguing. I will say, we watched a video interview that she was in with a couple other authors. It was it's probably something you can see on YouTube from PBS or something, where she's at a table of other scholars in Latinx literature. And I never heard her voice until we watched this video, right? And we've read all of these stories. This is probably halfway through the semester. And I'm thinking she's gonna be this like deep voiced, like hardcore woman, because she has a really strong voice in her writing. And she had like a very soft, like almost girlish voice at this table of all these authors. And I was just so surprised, thinking, I was like, wow, that's her voice. Anyway, ever since then, I followed her on Instagram. She posts some interesting things. I think she has a lot to offer both the literary world and just kind of like the artistic world, with her appreciation of different things like textiles and, Mexican culture, Texan culture, Chicago culture, stuff like that. So some of these really, I felt like I connected with. Other stories, obviously, I didn't feel like I could connect with, but the way that she writes, I think everyone can kind of find something. This is a collection of her poems, Loose Women, and as you can see by all the famous grad school page flags, we talked about a lot of different things in this. I found this more interesting than Woman Hollering Creek. Again, I'm not a woman, and I'm not Latinx, so some of these things, we had to discuss, like, understand maybe some of the cultural references or use of Spanish language and all that. Again, really like this, and I think this might have been the first thing we read, so none of us knew anything about her. We just kind of like dove in and we learned about like critical race theory and a couple other things and theories that surrounded Latinx literature, and then we just dove into this. And again, I'm also not that really good with poetry, which you all know, but I did definitely enjoy Loose Women. This is Caramello. This is a very complex story to read. You need to keep a character list while you're reading it. So our professor had us have like a little piece of paper and write the names of the characters and everything, and like maybe like a little timeline to keep inside of our book as we read it. As you can see with all my, again, sticky notes, we really went deep with this. And there's also some parallel storylines with timelines, like grandfather versus what's happening today, that can get confusing, but everything does come together. It's a very interesting story about a young woman, Mexican-American, growing up and going back to Mexico and interacting with her father's family and like the history behind all that. We learned some interesting things in the very end. But I almost want to use the word masterpiece for the writing of this novel. And I know that's kind of hard to say, but like, of course, as I was reading it, felt like it was a lot of things going on. I felt like it was a lot of work to read for a graduate level seminar with all the other things we had to do on top of just reading this. But I would definitely say it's rewarding. I don't know how Cisneros is able to conjure up a story like this that's so complex with the different generations. And one thing we did talk about in class is a lot of what she writes about is intertwined, right? So she'll make references to things throughout all of her stories. And sometimes when we were discussing them, we actually couldn't remember which story the thing we were talking about is from, because she mentions, X, Y, and Z in almost all of her works of literature. So it's just a very, it starts to get intertwined. But I would recommend Caramello. Maybe it would be like a good summer read where if you're just going to focus on this only, you could read it. Don't know if it was ever thought to be made into like a series or a book or anything. I'm a book, obviously it's a book. Movie. Can you tell I've only had a couple cups of coffee already? It would be great. I think at the end of reading this, our professor showed us the preview for the Mexican movie Roma, which came out a couple years ago, and I want to say it won an Oscar or something, but it's kind of like along that storyline too, with which I haven't watched it. It's still on my to-do list. Like with like the class system in Mexico and all that kind of stuff, and the servants of the family versus, it was very interesting. So that's Caramello. Now, the reason why I want to bring this up is Sandra Cisneros' Martita, I Remember You, came out in November, I believe, 2021, so just a few months ago. And the student group that I'm a part of for graduate students, we're actually hosting a book club for this book next week, so I need to read this now that I'm on spring break. So I think this is about, again, this like, young women coming up in Chicago or something, and all the things she faces to kind of like find her literary voice, and it might follow more one storyline. I actually have not read it yet, so I will post a video once I do read it, maybe after our book club, so we can talk about some takeaways from it. The interesting thing is that it's a dual English and Spanish book. So one side of the book is the Spanish version, which I believe Cisneros does not write her Spanish translation. She writes in English and then has a specific translator translate her stories. So that's interesting. It's short, so I don't think it'll be too difficult to read, but I am excited to, after having an entire course about this author, to read something, again, a popular book that you can pick up at Barnes & Noble. It's not like it's some obscure literary topic, to read that again. And I did want to mention, I think Caramello, when it came out in 2001 or 2000, something like that, I think it was one of the first like major publications in the US to like premiere both in the English and Spanish translation at the same time or something like that. I remember we talked about that too, so that was an interesting thing as well. So yeah, Martita, I Remember You. I will find out what this is about and let you all know. So that's my shtick on Cisneros. Another thing I will say that I liked having a kind of seminar focus on such a contemporary author is that she is living, she is alive and well, and she's still contributing to the literary field. And it's sometimes so crazy to think about that, because a lot of what we study is in the past, and the fact that it's happening now, and the fact that all these books, I think all of them, are books you can get at your local Barnes and Noble is a little bit more exciting, especially when you go to, you're taking all these different kind of classes. So I love that. So if anyone else has any recommendations that are kind of like Cisneros or contemporary counterparts, I would love to read them. And as always, thank you so much for watching. If you've read any of Sandra Cisneros' works, I'd love to hear about it. And for those of you who don't know, in 2015 she was a recipient of the National Medal of Arts from the National Endowment for the Arts. And her bio reads as, for enriching the American narrative, through her novels, short stories, and poetry, she explores issues of race, class, and gender through the lives of ordinary people straddling multiple cultures. As an educator, she has deepened our understanding of American identity.